Stories of sexual abuse by powerful men, starting with Harvey Weinstein, have literally been flooding the news lately. When you consider the sheer number of men and accusations, it really paints a picture of a culture where this kind of behavior is both pervasive and systemic. In Mr. Weinstein's case, there are now 87 women who have finally decided to go public. And the assaults go as far back as to the 70s. Just imagine, nobody has dared to come forward, not the victims or associates who must have known something. But that's just it. Social silence is a choice we make. It temporarily protects us from the effects of going public, the fallout. It gives us anonymity and protects our financial stability. Sadly, I was one of those women who chose to remain silent. Incredibly, I wanted to shield his family, the abuser's family, from the shame and embarrassment that his actions would have caused them. What I didn't take into consideration was that I allowed him to possibly continue and rape his next victim. I got lucky on account of my mother's intuition. She felt that I was in grave danger and became so hysterical, forcing my brother to go looking for me. Mom and I had met Mr. DeBarge at a cocktail party celebrating the grand opening of the House of Iran. Strange enough, he had not hired a single employee for the store yet, although he wasn't even living in Vancouver. And there I was, a recent university graduate looking for a job. He offered me the managerial and only position. We haggled over the salary and I was hired. The next day I started and expected to get an orientation, but he pretended to be too busy. At the end of the day, though, he invited me for a drink at his hotel bar to discuss business before his departure. Naively, I accepted. After we got our drinks, he urged me to go and call my mother to let her know I was going to be late. When I got back, I took one sip, and I knew I was in big trouble. He started touching me inappropriately, but I no longer could move and lost consciousness. The next thing I remember was seeing my brother John forcing the elevator doors to open and yanking me into safety. My response to the attempted rape is quite common. According to the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, it is the most underreported crime, with 63% of all sexual assaults not being reported to the police, and 8% of all rapes being work-related. Most shockingly, according to the statistics, 1 in every 5 women will be raped in her lifetime. That really begs the question, why? In my search for answers, I decided to start at the beginning. The book of Genesis states that both sexes were created as equal spiritual beings, but that Eve was created for the specific purpose of being Adam's helper. She was made from him and for him in a relationship of servitude. As a penalty for eating the forbidden fruit, he was to rule over her as she was to submit to him as her husband. Now, men wrote the stories of the Bible, so there must have been an intent to lower women's status, and the notion of women submitting to men has permeated our culture ever since. Thankfully, a much-needed correction in the equality of both sexes has emerged with the feminist movement, transforming our traditional roles. This explains why some men feel threatened by empowered women. It challenges their beliefs in their superiority. Yet, cases where young men are victims shatter our notion that this is about women. Actually, it is about the abuse of power, and it is about forcefully submitting one person to another one's will. Especially predatory men feel that they must prove to be the alpha male. They need to prove that they can have any woman or man anytime they so desire. They're never satisfied with their accomplishments, be it in bed or in business, and they always chase another dream. The lack they feel is existential, and underneath it is fear. They fear of not having enough. They never have enough money, power, possessions, sex, or success. But within themselves, they're empty and void of true substance. Fear is also a great motivator in keeping people to remain silent, both the victims and the bystanders. Recently, I attended the National Publicity Summit in New York, where I was presenting show ideas to the media. After I had pitched to a radio host, he took a look at my media sheet and he offered well-meant advice. He suggested that I should eliminate all critical references to President Trump. He felt that I might undermine my chances of being booked on some shows while also negatively affecting the sales of my book. I thanked him and I moved on. But here's the thing. I knew what I was doing when I made that sheet up. I knew it could hurt my bottom line, and it would have definitely been safer to choose cliches instead of the inconvenient truth. Later that evening, as I was waiting at the airport, I wanted to read something that was not work-related. Of all the books on my Kindle, I had to pick The Nazi Officer's Wife, How One Jewish Woman Survived the Holocaust. And there it was, the consequences of remaining silent in the face of a real threat. Not that all Germans remained silent, by no means, but the majority bought into the lies and falsehoods presented to them in the hope that it would improve their lives, although at the expense of others. Desperate times required desperate measures. Slowly, the poison, their hearts and minds were poisoned by the negativity that trickled down from the top, from Hitler himself. Their support gave Hitler the time to perfect his culture of fear and build up his police state with the Gestapo and SS. The threats were real and the fear was justified. The staggering result of remaining silent was, in total, about 71 million people died in World War II, with 6 million Jews losing their lives. Let that one sink in. There are universal laws that apply to all, be it an individual or a nation. What we give out comes back to us. As our society has chosen a more negative tone, negativity will come back. The antidote is love, compassion, and forgiveness, but not silence. If fear united Germans once to support Hitler and his ungodly acts against humanity, then it must be possible for us to reverse our negative state through the power of love and courage. We cannot afford to pay the price of silence, not when it is about abuse of power, be it sexual or otherwise. Once I chose to remain silent for all the wrong reasons, but this time silence would have far greater repercussions. And it's simple. When you see something, say something. Thank you.
Marina's talk was just so relevant, so courageous. courageous to tackle the abuse of power, not just sexual assault, but the abuse of power. And she spoke to it as not just as a woman, but as a human being, how it affects all of us. She gave great examples of how this has been abused throughout our recent history of humankind. And the antidote, I believe her, I really agree with her. It's about showing compassion and love and forgiveness, not about keeping silent. So I applaud Marina for taking that bold step and having the courage and the power to show love.
Okay, I had to bring my notes because what she said was, it was just so much content in there. And I so appreciate what Marina was saying, because she chose a very hot, touchy, dangerous subject. But it's something that I know not just the women, but everybody in our country right now, and I think people all over the world right now, are being quiet about. And she's talking about our social silence, about the abuse of power, and that ranges through show business and politics. I don't need to name names, everybody knows the names, but she was speaking to all of us, and me as somebody who has dealt with that as a woman in show business as well as in my regular life. I mean, I've dealt with it in a couple of different very serious ways, and I was one of those people who was silent because I didn't want to hurt other people. And I have to read this because it was so great what she said. The consequences can be staggering if we stay quiet. And the antidote is love, compassion, and forgiveness, but not silence. That's my takeaway. She's awesome.
Marina just blew me out of the water. I am one of these all over the place fuzzy wuzzy people in my brain. She was one of these rare, logical, step-by-step, person-by-person, and she nailed every point, and she had them. And there wasn't anything that you could challenge. It was perfect. I mean, she had done her homework. You could see that she was passionate about what she was saying, and she had really just engaged my gut that I wanted to support what she was advocating for and do my best to change my ways. And I'm no longer going to be silent about things that I know or see. And I'm too codependent, too kind, and that's not kind. So I just thank the world for having her, because I think the whole world needs to hear more of this lady. Thank you.